Good morning and welcome back to Plan & Craft. I'm Natalie and today we're going to be doing a bit of a question and answer session while I'm putting together a project from our upcoming book. So I'm going to wait for a few more of you to join me. Just say hi when you are tuned in and I'll say hi back. Now today is a question and answer session, so if you have any questions, there's no such thing as a daft question, then please do ask away and I will answer. So today we're going to be putting together a traveller's notebook project. And good morning, Deb. And I've basically started off with two pieces of paper which have been cut out on the ScanNCut. And on one of those we've got some text. So this was drawn with an Inkjoy liquid 0.5 nib, so nice and fine, and using the 3D thumbprint pen holder. And just for time I did it before we went live. Good morning, Thea. So that's going to be the start of my project, and when it's done we can then stick that into our traveller's notebook. But I thought I would cover very quickly cutting by colour. So if I hop over to close cam, you can see that we've got our project up on screen, and at the moment it looks all pretty scattered. So each one of these groups is a different colour or material. Now if you have a CM machine, you could cut all of those at once, no problem. Believe it or not. So you're actually going to set it to the thinnest material first, cut everything, then remove the thinner materials that are already cut, and go around again, move the blade slightly further up for the next set, and so on and so forth until all your pieces are cut. Now on a DX it gets a little bit more complex. So because my design has a range of materials, we're going to cut it by colour. So good morning, Linda, and morning, Mum. Bear with me one moment, I'm just going to change view so I can see if any comments on the group. Oh, okay. So what do we have? We have some card that we're going to be using. So we have 4 sheets of card. We have a deep purple, a lilac, a light green and a dark green. It's probably not coming across on screen quite as vivid as it is in real life. We have 2 pieces of vinyl, mainly because I haven't decided which colour I'm going to go for yet. And we've got a transfer sheet. So transfer sheets are really good where you want to move across multiple pieces but keeping them in relation to one another. So for instance, if you've got a border where it's made up of a series of separate dots, then that's when you would want to use your transfer tape. Now which transfer tape you are using is going to vary by what material you're working with. So the one I'm using today is actually the one that came with the vinyl, and because we're going to be working on paper, that is absolutely fine. If you want to transfer the card, for instance, instead, then you would want to go to a lower tack transfer so that you can lift that back off easily. Okay, so looking at that design on the machine, we have each of these is a separate colour. So we have our, let's pull up my design so I can see it in front of me. We have our light lilac, our darker purple, our vinyl section in which originally I put as pink, but we'll see what it goes to. We've got our wired, which is a dark purple, but again that could be cut out of vinyl too, so I may be doing an alternative colour for that. We have 2 photo mounts, so at the moment I've got those to cut out in white, but that's where you would put your actual photos for your traveller's notebook. We have 2 sets of border strips to make a pretty little border, and we have a little flag that is going to be where our ticket's going to sit. So as we have all those elements spaced out like that, it's useful to have a separate document which actually shows the layout in situ that you can refer back to. So I have that I can refer back to at any point. So let's start off with, I'm going to start with our card elements and leave our vinyl to last. So when we're cutting by colour, we could be trimming down our individual elements so that we are using just a section of that card, which means that we can cut things at once. And I would advise you to do that whenever you have materials that are going to be the same thickness. And good morning, Tracy. Hopefully you are feeling a little better. So let's pull out my cutting mat so that we can start to load that up. Just going to move my mouse out the way. So let's start with our card and our trimmer. This is where I tend to use the grid on my cutting mat as a kind of rough guide for trimming my materials. So for instance, what I am going to do is I'm going to cut this purple separately because I can feel straight away that it's quite a bit thicker than my other colours. So that with the DX it's really important that you kind of, yay, you can hear me today. It's really important that we don't put a thicker material on that first shape because otherwise we risk cutting through the mat on the rest of the shapes. So the lilac one is about 4 by 4, but slightly bigger. So let's take that off a little. So I have a little slight arm on my trimmer here. I'm going to trim that to about 5 by 5 should be plenty. So it's always best to err on the side of caution and go slightly larger than you think you actually need it. Because the last thing you want to do is when you're cutting is go off this edge, because again you risk cutting through your mat if it goes off the edge. So that's that one. So next we have our two greens. So we have a dark green that is going to be our one thin border strip, and that needs a piece that measures about 1 by 6. So we can actually measure that on our trimmer. So we've got about 7 inches that way. Or we have got a bit longer in that direction. So I think I'm just going to cut myself a 1 inch strip on this long edge. So again, always going to allow extra than what we actually need it to be. Then we have our pale green, and that's going to need about 1.5 inch strip. But I can just do that from the full 12 by 12. As most of those elements go across the mat, so there we go. So we can cut those first few pieces because they are all of a similar weight. Let's move my trimmer back out of the way for a moment, and let's move back to our machine so you can see what I'm going to do over here. So with your design in front of you, you are going to delete everything that you aren't going to use. So if you go into edit, you're going to see that I've actually grouped most of my elements into their corresponding colours. So at the moment I have those elements that are going to be cut in vinyl, so we can definitely get rid, and that can go too. We know that this group here can go. So if you have something like this where you want to actually do a multi-select We can drag that up. These two white boxes are going to go too. So we can go OK, OK and delete. And finally, let me get this the right way round. So our darker purple is the one with the little bit of a border detail. So I can delete that. OK. And while we're working with this design on our machine, it is not working on the original. So up in the cloud, I still have my full file ready to refer back to when I need it. So now we have all these elements kind of spaced out across our map. So let's see if we can't make our life a little easier. So I'm going to bring this up to there. Oh, that one up a bit too. Now, ideally, because I'm working with a longer map, I don't want to do a background scan. So this is where you're going to want to put your card on, and then you can actually double check that everything lines up where you think it's going to be. So I'm just going to line the pieces straight onto the mat. I'm using my grid as a reference. So the piece is nice and level. Okay. So we know that we have 5 squares down, which is the purple. Then I've just put in an inch space. That's going to drop down to this line here. So just underneath the 6-inch line is where that next bit of card goes. So if I go to nudge, I can just nudge that down so I know it's in the middle of the strip. And likewise, our next piece comes down an inch below that. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. So now we can go OK. And we've got all our elements in there. Now in terms of which blade to use, this section here has quite an intricate little scallop on it. So I would say at that point you're going to want to change to your vinyl blade. So vinyl blade isn't just for vinyl. I'm going to load my mat, and yes, I know I was naughty then because I just swapped my blade before loading my mat in. There we go. I'm going to go OK, so we can see that all our elements are on there and they're black rather than blue, so we know that everything is going to cut. Pressure wise, I just put my pressure up a little bit on the vinyl blade. Speed wise, might take it down just 1 notch because that same small border detail. If it was a wavy one, so in other words if you've got nice smooth undulation like this, then you can go a bit quicker. But because the scallop is going like this, you've got to bear in mind these little pointy corners and allow that blade time to get where it needs to. Now, if you find that when you cut your scallops, those little pointy bits are actually pulling, that's a sign that you need to lower your pressure. And also, I would also consider lowering your speed at that point as well, if you can. If you're already going at the slowest though, it's going to be your pressure. So while that's cutting, have you got any questions? If you're on the group or on the page, I can see comments on both today. How's everybody finding the 11 o'clock slot now? Is it a bit of a funny time as we all start to return to a bit more of a normal? Do you think we should start looking at a slightly later time? Or did you prefer the earlier time when we were going at 8 o'clock? I just like to keep checking, making sure that, you know, we're doing what suits everyone. So, now we can remove our waste. So I do use a metal palette knife to take off my pieces, just so it can slide underneath a little bit easier. So there's our little tiny scallop, and it is tiny. And then we have our border pieces to go on top. Just make sure you always take off the waste that gets left behind as well, because you don't want it going inside your machine, because these are little tiny dots and they would love to get to where they shouldn't. So now we can go to our thicker card, which is the darker purple, and we can bring that same file back in again. So the way you would split up this file will vary by which materials you choose. So although I'm doing it one way now with the card that I have, if I was to change a feature such as this scallop border to a translucent paper, then you would want to reassess your cutting order. So I'm going to go back home and reset, retrieve data, and back to the Wi-Fi, and that's going to bring back in all those original elements. Now for speed, I'm just going to do a window select, because all we actually want for this is one shape. So I'm just going to go OK, OK, and delete. And then we can click over to that one and delete that one too. So now we can just slide that over to the top left, so we're not using up any extra material than we need to. We can go OK, and again, because there's intricate cutting involved with this one, I'm still going to leave that same vinyl blade in place. So, are you guys excited for a new book? So this project comes back 3/4 of the way through the book. You literally start from blank page and set it all up. When is it coming out? I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to get all the images finished today. Literally, this is one of 4 that need doing today, and then hopefully, if I'm really good, I can get the covers on today as well. So covers is generally the last thing that gets done, just because you never quite know where the spline's going to end up, depending on page count. So it's always good to kind of wait to the end for that bit. So the plan is that it should be through all the the sort of vetting procedure that Amazon do in time for the weekend. Fingers crossed. So it's an appropriate month for it to be out because it's National Craft Month here in the UK. So lots of craft companies have competitions going on. So which one is this called? Okay, this is the Designing with Vectors project book. So if you want to create the projects in Affinity, you can do that. If you want to create it in Illustrator, you can do that. We've included a little bit of a reminder from the Designing with Vectors book 1, very briefly for shortcuts and things like that. If you want to do it in scale, you can do that, and if you want to do it in Canvas, you can do that too. Now, what I will say with Canvas is there are certain elements which you can't do without having some kind of additional software. Right, there we go. So, now that piece is done, let's get this one off. So this is where we're going to want a pokey tool. And we're going to poke through all the little holes. So let's go back overhead. So yep, it goes with the last book. Okay, take those bits out. Then it's on to Scan and Cut book 2, which I've had a few ideas about already. So I've started writing some sections, but I was thinking it would be really good to kind of include a few different ways of doing one project, depending on which add-ons you have. So you can see whether the add-ons are going to be suitable for you or not. I'm not going to give you the answer. You kind of need to work out what suits you and your interests. So I'll take you through which one does, what it adds. Okay, so we're nearly there. You may also have seen I put up on the group a little bit of a crafty surprise that we've been working away on behind the scenes. So you can actually go and purchase now over on the Polkadoodle website, which is cool. So get all those little tiny bits out of the way, because we don't want to get those accidentally going back into our machine, either on top of our mat or underneath it. So keep those well away from there. So we now have, let's go the right way around, our little border strip, like so. And then we're going to have, that's going to attach like that. This one's going to attach onto there. And we have our little flag for our tickets to sit on. So far so good. So now it's just the title, and then we can assemble that all together. So very quickly, let's get my waste off my mat. I do apologise that you can't see this bit. It's a bit hard to kind of get a camera over there and see a screen. So, vinyl. I'm going to go OK and home to reset again. I'm going to go back to retrieve data and pull down the design again. We're going to go to edit, multi-select, and just tap anywhere that isn't a shape. We can then use our Windows select, like so, go OK, and delete that one. Then we need to delete these elements here, so we can go back into our multi-select, tap off, and delete, and click on that bottom group and we can delete that one. So then that gives us our two sets of vinyl. Now, just because I didn't do it on the machine, let's just shrink down our window, so we're just going to have our wired selected. We can go into object edit and we can group that. That's just so that when we're moving things around, it's going to be a little bit easier. So again, go back into multi-select. It's going to go to Windows select and do the same for our pink temporarily. Now, the reason that we group the pink on the machine like that is because then I can always ungroup it if I need to move the two around independently. If I grouped it in Canvas and then sent it to the machine, what you would then find is that you can't ungroup it if you need to fit something into a fragment of paper, for instance, or vinyl. So consider your grouping. But I did group all those little bows that we can see at the bottom here, because we want to keep those relative to one another to be able to put those onto our border. Okay, so one other thing we need to do is we need to add a reading box. But first of all, let's see about trimming some of our vinyl. So let's bring our vinyl back in. And we can decide whether we're going to go for the lilac on our bows or whether we're going to go pink. And I think just for the contrast, I'm going to go pink. And we don't need a very big section of the pink either. So let's go on here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares across by about 4 up. So you always go 1 over. So back out with our little arm again. I'm going to trim this at 4. And then rotate and trim at 5. And we can place that onto our mat up into the top corner. Then we can take our lilac, which we'll use for our title, and that's about 3 across by, should fit in 2 up. So let's do a strip of, let's do 2.5 rather than 2. Just give us a little extra. And 3 should be more than enough. So let's go 3.5, just because it's easier to see on my trimmer. And that can go, line that up at 6. And press that down too. Okay. So now I'm going to take these elements, I'm going to move them up to that top corner. And this one lines up at 6. And I'm going to take that up there. So now we can see that actually there's a little bit of leeway that we can use. So if we ungroup, click off, we can push that over to the left. And we can nudge that up if we want to. Okay. Now we've still got our vinyl blade in, but this time we're going to half cut. So this is where we only want to cut through the top layer. So if we go into settings, we're going to go down, turn on half cut, then you've got your half cut pressure, which at the moment is set to auto. Now if you've done the most recent update, you can find that this can be a little temperamental. I actually ended up going back a few updates just to make that bit more stable, but for now I'm going to leave it on auto. You also have the option of adding an automatic weeding box. So if you are cutting this design out of a full sheet of vinyl, that is when you would want to use a weeding box, so that you're not wasting a full sheet for just a little tiny bit in the corner. But because we've done that trimming, we don't have to. So I'm going to go OK. And let's give it a go. It's got 2 chances. It'll either work or it doesn't work. So let's quickly check on the comments. Okay. So if you have any questions relating to software, let's have a software question. I've actually been testing out a new piece of software, well, new to me anyway, which is looking really promising for us switching over to that, as it has a lot of the extra functionality that I'm keeping Illustrator for, but Illustrator is going up to some silly price per month. So I'm looking at alternatives that are in some ways even more powerful. So let's start pulling some of this design together while that's cutting. I'm going to go back overhead. And I'm going to have open in front of me my layout. I'm going to assemble my 2 border strips so that they're ready to go. Now the short section is going to be the top, and you want to make sure when you're assembling these, especially if you use a texture card, that you've got it the right way up. So that might seem like a fairly obvious thing to check, but believe me, it won't be the first time that gone, oh dear, no, didn't want to do that. I'm just going to use a little bit of glue between the dots. Now, with this design, what I originally intended to do was just do a little bit of ribbon weaving between these dots, but for this, we'll do like that. Okay, let's take the next strip. And we're going to do the same again. So I'm just looking at my original design. If there's any elements like you've got full scallop up here and half one down here, just go back to your original design and just double check that you've got everything up the right way. So the idea with your traveller's notebook is to try and keep your design as flat as possible. So where I was planning on doing ribbon weaving through these holes, it actually finishes with a vinyl bow just to keep it nice and flat. So we'll apply that in a minute. And then we have a little border strip, and again make sure that you've got both pieces up the right way. And we're going to align that on there. So this is another good top tip when you're creating a design. If you have something that has an intricate border where it repeats and you've got space between each element, it's actually easier to cut out the design from a piece rather than trying to apply a border over the top. Tracy said, spill the beans, what is it called? So, don't quote me on this, but I think it's called Vector Styler, and it has some really cool tools. So if you are working with things that can get very complicated, so if you're working with nets and things like that, or if you're working with organic shapes, so let's say you want to do some paint splats, it's brilliant for paint splats. Okay, so before I go too far, what I do want to just double check is that that is all cut properly. So I'm just going to peel back a little bit and just make sure that that is all peeling off nicely. And that looks promising. So let's do the pink too. Never assume that because it's the same material that it will always have cut, because you can find that even though they're in the same packs, you can get small elements of difference between thicknesses between colours. So let's pull those off. Okay. Going to unload my mat. Pop that up there for a moment. And this is where you're going to want a hook tool. So we use hooks whenever we are trying to remove elements of vinyl from another, and you can see it, there we go. So just because there's a fair bit of vinyl here that I haven't cut, I'm just going to give this another little trim, because all these little strips of vinyl are really useful for when we want to personalise projects. So do try and keep like a little tub where you can actually save those. Okay, so first of all, let's remove the outside. this is the main waist. Now if you are weeding something where you've got much finer detail, then you're going to want to do the inside of your letters first. Okay. Now we need to get out the centres. So generally it doesn't take much. This is more a case of just breaking that adhesive on the back. They do like to re-weld themselves. So put that there. Just try and avoid getting it to adhere to the front of your main piece. Come on. There we go. So if you have a little nail varnish holder, you can use that. If you have like a old wet wipes container, you know, the type I mean with the plastic slotty tops, you can use that. Oh, we glitched out. Okay, vector styler, which is, it's about twice the price of Affinity. Is the only drawback on it, but when you compare it to Illustrator, about on the new prices, you're going to be looking at about 2 months worth of Illustrator to pay for vector styler, which I think, you know, on a cost per month. The only thing is your Illustrator plugin, so if you have the ScanNCut link, like I do, they will not work with it. I've tried finding other software that will actually run the Illustrator plugins, but sadly, no, not happening. Okay, so we start off with our main panel, which hopefully starts to set a little. And that's going to go, let's see if I can get this right way around, that way. Like so. Give everything a good press down. Now what I would say is do try and let this all dry under a nice heavy weight before transferring that into your journal. And the next bit. The other thing to bear in mind is at the moment I haven't cut out my photos, so they will help you out as well. Okay. So just try and make sure that you've got it level. Okay. Now I want to continue that line to come up to this top edge here. So what you can do is if you have a T-square, you can use that. Alternatively, you can use the grid on our cutting mat. So I'm just going to line up a reference point on this one with my grid, and then I can do the same down on this top edge here. So that right hand edge goes in line with this grid line here, And there we go. So for elements like this where you're going to be snipping it in two, I would say is when you cut your photos, just go slightly bigger so it's going to cover that edge. Did I miss a tiny bit in the pink? Oh yes, I did, thank you. There's a tiny little bit in the S. Well spotted there, Tracy. So let's just get that bit up there. There we go. Okay, so back up the right way so we don't get confusing. That's going to go like so. Then we've got our little flag. So this was created with two trapezii. You weld them together so that you get like a little flag and chop off the end to get the straighter edge. And that's going to go about there. So because I'm using the aqua glue, you do get a bit more of a wiggle time, but you also tend to get a little bit more slide. So just be wary of that when you're placing things down, that as you lift up you don't accidentally move things. So normally what I would say at this point is let that set for a bit, but in the interest of getting this done within our hour slot, let's get our transfer tape. So with transfer tape I don't tend to use a full sheet. Let's go up one. So what I'll do is I'll cut a section and use that. Kind of a bit like how you would use a stamp block, I suppose. So size the block to the design. Then the fun bit, getting your nail underneath to lift up your transfer tape. So this one is quite high tack, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just be aware when you come to actually put it down on your paper. If you struggle to get your vinyl off, what I would suggest doing is working from the back, and hopefully it hasn't overcut. So back to from this end. There we go. Come on, little R, or not a little R. Let's get you to stick. Sometimes you do just need to get your nail in there and give it a little bit of encouragement, shall I say. So if you're getting this issue where you've kind of got paper pulling back, that just means that you've cut a little too deep. So next time when you do it, just lift up that pressure just a little, and there we go. So then we have a word. And that goes round about there. So when we're looking to do a kind of dynamic design, good trick is to make sure you have an even amount on all corners. So basically we've got a thin border here, and then I've gone double that here and like 3 times up there, and then you've got the rest of the page. Whereas if you want it to look a bit more sedate, then you could have 2 or more sides that match. Okay, first one done. Let's get for sound, because those 2 are gonna. Other music tracks are available. peel that off. There's always one. Come on, Mister. There we go. So don't be afraid to get your nails in there if it needs it. And then we can line that up. That's going to be offset over to the right hand side. And we can choose whereabouts we're going to line that up. So I do find that having a transfer tape with a grid is really useful for whenever you're doing text, because straight away you can see whether you're level. Now, if you struggle with your vinyl lifting at any point, before you reapply your transfer tape back to your backing, or if you have a spare bit of vinyl backing, just go shiny side down and just give it a little bench over the top. So it's just these little bits over here. So I'm going to do these one strip at a time. So this is the top strip. So make sure that you get these off. Come on, be good. Now if you do get anywhere the backing just is being stubborn, it's better to have it transferred to the transfer tape than still in the right kind of placement, and then worry about the backing paper after. Okay, so you can see the first one went swimmingly well, the rest of the row not so much. I'm just going to get my hook tool. And very gently encourage it away. Now it can take a little bit of a, there we go. So because we're going onto paper, it's a little bit more forgiving in terms of your adhesive. Things to watch out for with vinyl. Don't have moisturiser on your hands. Do wash your hands before you start using it, so that you're not accidentally transferring oils to your adhesive. Okay. So I'm going to line those up, and let's put those just there. Let's give it a little bench for you now. Now where you're going over multiple layers like this, you just get the curved side of your hook tool and just kind of encourage it into the nooks and crannies, like so. Then I can do the next row. Come on. The first two won't really quite come on. There we go. And the last one. The last one's always the trickiest because you don't want it to accidentally ping and lose the placement. Nothing worse than having like a perfect row of 3 and then the fourth one goes nope. going to go down on this row here, like so. And there we go. One last one, which is our big bow, which should be where our weaving stops. Which you could apply like a sticker if you wanted to, just as it's a single shape. But if it's easier for you in terms of application, then stick it on your transfer over the top, and I'm just going to try and match that up in terms of the spacing. There we go. And there we go. So we then have our double page layout. We're going to have a photo up here, another one just there, and a little miniature ticket just there. And there goes our layout. So I hope you've enjoyed that today, and I look forward to introducing the rest of the book to you when it launches. So it's certainly going to be a fun one. So the projects typically range from scrapbooking, art journaling, creating your own stencils, right through to the final big project, which is creating your own craft range. So we'll literally take you through all the elements you're going to need. Deb, you're honestly saying you haven't tried vinyl yet? Oh, you'll be hooked. Literally. But yeah, it's addictive, I warn you now, because you will go round the pound shop or local bargain shop and be like, oh, I could find all that. Oh, that would look nice vinyl. So I have to try and be good. Never go out. So, but vinyl is so good for doing the text, because obviously if I was to try and do that in card, trying to keep all this text in position and transfer it is a lot more tricky. You can do it with things like self-adhesive card. So if you have like the Graphics self-adhesive card stock, you can do it that way with a transfer tape. But yes, you can put vinyl on cards as well. In actual fact, there isn't much I haven't put vinyl on. So I did a cutting board. The chopping board's nice. Still got that. And I did some cups for Christmas. And wine glasses, coasters. So yeah, basically if you're going to struggle to draw on something, then it's a good secondary option, because it does go nice and flat. Let me just change view so I can see what we, come on, focus camera, focus. It looks like my eyes first thing in the morning. Oh, Louise, if you want to talk about dice sub, you need to talk to Tracy. Tracy is our DT expert in dice sub. So it's one I'd like to do, and I kind of have part of the equipment to do it now, but a little bit different. So I've actually got some sublimation pens, but then I'm suddenly thinking, okay, but now I might need a heat press. So I'm going to start off with some lip designs I can do with my iron first and see if we can get the iron hot enough. So. Yeah, sublimation is cool because you can go on to different surfaces than HGV can do. So HGV will typically go on your natural surfaces, so things like cotton, linen, whereas dye sub you need to have like polyester as your base to work onto. Alright, okay guys, I'll be round to do me me subbing then. So I hope you've had a good time. Now I may, I put this in big inverted commas, I may be on tomorrow night as a emergency stand-in, just because I know that there's a possibility. There's a big may. If I do, we're going to be working one way with a sketch. That is the sketch of the week for Pretty Gets Gritty. On Friday, I'm going to be doing a different project with the same sketch. So I'm sure you will love what we will be doing. Yeah, you can, I believe you can sublimate onto vinyl too, which would look cool. Yeah, definitely got to try the glitter. So, I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. It looks a bit dark out there, so stay indoors and craft. Good excuse. Take care, and I will see you either tomorrow evening or Friday at 11 in the usual slot. Those of you that are members may see me before then, depending on what happens with tomorrow night. So take care and